Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for 0 Hour, which is episode 24 of season 3 of Star Trek Enterprise. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek as determined by my user polls. The episode to win my user poll for Star Trek Enterprise is 0 Hour. So 0 Hour is the final episode in the Xindi story arc where the Xindi go to destroy Earth, particularly the reptilians, and Archer goes on board with other Xindi, primates and arboreals, to stop this from happening. Meanwhile, Enterprise has to go within the spheres to try to stop the sphere builders from taking over the galaxy, and of course they're all successful in their various tasks. And Archer is successful with a little help from Shran, but Archer has to give his life in the process in order to save Earth and defeat the reptilians, or so it would appear, as he actually reappears in some weird version of Earth's past. Anyway, so I talked about this episode a lot in my Season 3 review, particularly Part 2 of my Season 3 review, because I had so much to say about Season 3 of Enterprise that I went on for 3 hours. I had to split it into 2 halves. And particularly the second half, I'm just gushing and gushing and gushing about how amazing this season is, and how it is one of my, I think when I did ranked all of the seasons of Star Trek, this was in my top 5 season 3 of Enterprise, and this is sort of its crowning achievement. This is the big finale that ties everything together, and part of what makes this season so great, and that of course is in huge contrast to my reviews of season 1 and 2 of Enterprise, which are at the absolute bottom of my list, where I think those 2 seasons are the worst of the entire Star Trek franchise. So you see how that's such a huge, drastic change. Now, with my latest user poll, it's kind of funny because the episode that came in second was Countdown, which is the episode that directly precedes this. In fact, I always say that the final 3 episodes of season 3 make a sort of a trilogy. The Council, Countdown, and 0 Hour. And there have been times in some countdowns and whatnot where I group all 3 episodes together. Or at the very least, I would group Countdown and 0 Hour together. But I decided for the purposes of these reviews to do each episode individually. It's, I guess, due to my format, I have to do them all out of order. I did Council like a couple years ago, I think, and it's a shame that it may be longer before I do Countdown. It's a shame, but I didn't want to do them both. I could have said, oh, this is for both Countdown and 0 Hour, but I thought each episode deserved its own sort of remark. Kind of like it's similar to what I did with Deep Space Nine with the Dominion takeover story arc, because I did Sacrifice of Angels like 4 or 5 years ago, and then 2 years ago I did the episode right before it, Favor of the Bold, and then just a few months ago, I think just last year, I did the episode before that, Behind the Lines, and then I did the first episode in that arc, or the second episode in that arc, Time to Stand, like a couple months ago as well, so I'm kind of splitting it all up, but whatever. It is weird because it all tells one story, and that's particularly true of season 3 of Enterprise, particularly this ending arc. Now, obviously, season 3 of Enterprise was all about the Xindi arc. It begins at the very end of season 2 with introducing this concept, this vague concept of a race called the Xindi that want to destroy Earth, that sent a probe that killed 7 million people, kind of a 9/11-esque event. Of course, this episode aired shortly during that time period, so it was obviously a huge analogy for it, which is what Star Trek does. I mean, Star Trek wouldn't be Star Trek if it wasn't making analogies to modern day events. But the season 3, even though a lot of people say it's a highly serialized season, which it is, in fact, I think this season succeeded a hell of a lot more in serialized continuous storytelling ironically than the two modern shows, Discovery, which at the time of this recording has had 2 seasons, and Picard, which has had 1 season. Both of which, like, a lot of people put those shows down because, they said they should. Star Trek is always episodic, which is a statement I debate. I think that's a bullshit statement. I mean, it's true to a degree, but I don't think it's its strength as being episodic. But the thing with Discovery and Picard, and why so people are upset with the serialization, it's not that serialization doesn't belong in Star Trek, and people who make that argument, I think, are wrong. But it's that Discovery and Picard weren't that great at doing serialized storytelling. I mean, there are aspects of it that worked, but the problem with both of those shows is that if you look at the season, which is supposed to tell one story, as a whole, it's very poorly paced and kind of falls apart, and it's kind of all over the damn place. Reason why I bring that up is because this here, season 3 of Enterprise, is much, much better paced, and particularly the second half of the season. I mean, the first half was a bit rough, let's be fair, but the second half of the season, really well paced, really comes together, particularly this ending arc, which was absolutely amazing and so incredibly well earned. That's, Discovering Picard can actually learn a thing or two from good old Enterprise, if I do have to say. And so I disagree with those who think that modern day Star Trek shows shouldn't be serialized. I think they absolutely should, but they should work on doing a better job at it. Is all I'm saying. Kind of like Enterprise season 3 did, and kind of like Deep Space Nine did with their certain story arcs in season 6 and season 7. There are examples that really, really works for Star Trek. They just gotta try harder. Although, that being said, I'm not opposed to having an episodic modern-day Star Trek show, which just says Strange New Worlds is supposed to be episodic. That's all well and good. I think that's fine. You had some modern shows that are episodic, while others are more serialized. They just need to make the seasons work better. Like this one. Anyway, I'm sorry, getting off on the track here. 0 Hour is an episode. It's funny because I talked about this when I did my season 3 Enterprise review. Is when I was living in New Zealand at the time, before internet was really huge, especially over there. Downloading stuff off the internet wasn't that commonplace, and I was doing a bit of downloading of Enterprise, but it would take 24 hours to download one episode, and it would be coming glitches and stuff, and not all episodes would be available. So mostly I was had my mother, who still lived in the U.S., tape and mail me episodes of Enterprise, and she did not mail me 0 Hour. So for the longest time, I thought season 3 ended on a cliffhanger with a countdown. And then I went online and I found out that there is actually another episode after countdown. I was like, what the fuck? Why didn't she mail it to me? And that's when I went on the internet and took 25 hours to download this episode so I could see it, because I wanted to see the finale. And if I do remember correctly, I think I actually, in fact, yes, I definitely saw the first 2 episodes of season 4 before I saw this episode, which is kind of sucks for me. That's all out of order for now. Particularly season 3 of Enterprise, which the second half I saw all out of order, because it works so well in order. Now, yes, because the first half of Enterprise, there was all these sidebars that were barely touched on the Xindi story arc, and even in the second half, there was a few sidestepped adventures, like Phlox being alone on the Enterprise, or a second version of Enterprise that has their ancestors from the Enterprise time traveling back, stealing the plot from Children of Time, Deep Space Nine, but that's okay. Stuff like that, but whenever they harken down, focused on the main Xindi story arc, episodes like Azadi Prime, freaking Damage, freaking The Forgotten, especially these last 3 episodes, Council Countdown, and 0 Hour, is when it come together. Now, I know someone who watched Countdown and 0 Hour out of context. They didn't watch pretty much anything of season 3. definitely not the episodes that lead up to it. And they didn't like it. They thought, oh, these episodes are terrible. I didn't like them. So I can kind of say I could just be that person's personal taste, but I kind of see that you kind of do need to watch these episodes in context. It's like watching Sacrifice of Angels without watching any of the lead up to it. Like I do know someone who watched Call to Arms without watching any other Deep Space Nine episodes, and they were kind of like, yeah, I don't see what's so great about this. Because that's the great thing. And I don't think this is a flaw. I think this is a huge plus. With this kind of serialized storytelling, you're able to slowly build the characters and the situations so that it greatly rewards repeat viewings. And I think these final episodes of Season 3 of Enterprise, were built on such strong, well-earned foundation that I actually think it's better than a lot of other celebrated Star Trek episodes, like The Best of Both Worlds, for example, which I know I'll get a lot of shit from because, how dare you, that's the best episode in all Star Trek, which, if you're familiar with my channel at all, I don't think it is. I still think it's good. I still think it's a good episode. In fact, when I rewatched it recently for my Next Generation review, I liked it even better than I remember liking it. But I don't think it's the best episode of all Star Trek, and I think this episode does it better. I know I'm going to get a lot of people disagreeing. In fact, when I recently watched Best of Both Worlds Part 2, I immediately thought of 0 Hour. And I was like, it's kind of very similar. In fact, you could say how this episode was kind of emulating Best of Both Worlds. Or in some ways, the entire Xindi story arc was. So don't get me wrong, they're definitely trying to copy or revive that sort of same feeling that Best of Both Worlds did because it was so popular, which I absolutely think it is. But the reason why I personally think it's better is exactly what I was saying, the serialization, how more well-owned, because there's much more foundation for this storyline, there's so much more investment, there's much more character buildings rather than just having, Shelby show up and oh, the Borg are coming, oh shit, they're coming in one episode, and next episode, the Data, let's put them to sleep, and they're all asleep. Again, that's kind of downplaying Best of Both Worlds, because don't get me wrong, I do actually really like that two-parter. But I think having a year ago being oh, these people are coming to kill Earth, and then having Archer go and investigate it, and real long put so much in his life, and you follow his character journey throughout this whole time, and then you meet this whole other, instead of just, I think this episode benefits from the fact that the Xindi are complex. You got 5 different races. You have a lot of complex different characters. Even though what's-his-face Dolman, the reptilian, does come off as a bit mustache twirly at times, but even then, there's some nuance to his character, because you can see how the Guardians, as they call them, the Sphere Builders, were like gods to them, and that they saved the race. And you can kind of get his undying devotion, of course, his ambition of lust for power, becoming the most powerful Xindi. I think his character does make sense, and I think you could actually point to historical figures that this character is modeled off of. Now, that's not to say that the Borg were two-dimensional mustache twirly, because there's a lot about the Borg, particularly in Best of Both Worlds, that really worked. But you don't really see a face to them. I mean, that's kind of the point, that they're mindless, unstoppable, you will be assimilated, blah, blah, blah. That can't be reasoned with, and I get that, and that is good storytelling, as I said. But I kind of like it better when there's nuance and realistic character portrayals and a lot more ins and outs that you can explain. And this is actually, I love this 3-part ending Countdown 0. I love it all, and that's why I usually group it all together, because really it all just tells one story. But if I had to say I liked one episode better than the other, I would and I said this before in my review of The Council. The Council is actually my favorite, and then Countdown will probably be my second favorite, and this is my third favorite out of those 3 episodes. Because The Council and Countdown more deal with that inter-politics, inter-struggle, and how it's not as simple as, the good guys going in and kicking the ass of the bad guy, and there's like, actually, no, we have to make alliance with these people, we have to try to negotiate with these people, and there's these other people in the shadow trying to manipulate these people, but these people disagree. Like, that is Star Trek in a nutshell. Complex, realistic storytelling that tells you that, first of all, war is bad. Secondly, things are not as simplistic as good versus evil, not in the slightest. Real life has lots of ins and outs and people, and they're just people trying to get by who has their own motivations and everything. Now, talking about mustache twirly, you could say the spear builders are kind of mustache twirly, but I would actually compare them more to like the Borg or Species A472 or something like that, where, again, there's nothing wrong with the Borg, and there's nothing wrong with Species A472, and having that sort of conquering, seeing all other human races and other humanoid races and stuff as ants or lower forms of life, and something to just be eradicated and manipulated. And that's fine. But what I like about this episode is that you don't just get that, in contrast to Best of Both Worlds. You get more. You get so many different, all these complex situations and everything. Now, the reason why I would say 0 Hour would be my least favorite of the 3 is because it is more of action, we have to defeat the bad guys. And again, nothing wrong with that. In fact, I still think this episode is better than Best of Both Worlds. Sorry, but I do. But that's why I like the lead up to it better, is because they get into more of the politics and the character building and stuff. But there's still a lot of character building in this, and there's some politics too. Like, I love how Shran shows up to help Archer. And I don't think, I haven't heard anyone make the argument that this is a Deus Ex Machina, but if they did, if you want to make that argument, I will tell you to your face right now that you're wrong. It totally is not a Deus Ex Machina. I think it is extremely well earned. Now, for me, I think Deus Ex Machina is a term that gets thrown around a lot. Where for me, I think if something's earned and it makes sense for the characters to show up at a time to save the heroes or whatever, if it makes sense, if it's earned, if it's telegraphed, if it's in keeping with the characters, then I wouldn't call that a Deus Ex Machina. Personally, this is me. If it's just something that seems like the writer's like, oh fuck, how do I get out of the situation? Oh, let's just have God show up and take his hand and save our people, even though it makes no sense, it has no established. That's a Deus Ex Machina. Eagles and Lord of the Rings, I think that's a Deus Ex Machina. I heard of Lord of the Rings fans trying to defend that, but I think they're wrong on that. But this situation, similar to Sacrifice of Angels, is another thing I defended as not being in Deus Ex Machina. That one I heard a lot of people say was Deus Ex Machina, but to be fair, I haven't heard anyone say that about Shran in this episode. But I can imagine someone making that argument. Because it does, if you just watch, again, if you watch this episode in isolation, it would appear to come out of nowhere, but if you've seen Proving Ground in the previous episodes in the previous seasons with Shran and his interactions with Archer, it makes total sense for Shran's character. First of all, he's built like this friendship, camaraderie with Archer, even though they don't always get along, particularly in Proving Ground when they took up opposite sides and he was trying to manipulate Archer, and Archer found out about it and kicked his ass over it. But he still has this underlining respect for Archer, and you could see how first of all, the Andorians are kind of warlike. I mean, not in the same way as Klingons, quite different, but definitely more warlike than, say, like the Vulcans. And so, for one, it would make sense that he would want to be involved in a good fight. And for two, it makes sense that he likes Archer and likes humans and doesn't want to see the world annihilated. I mean, because that's a huge thing. And plus, he could rightfully deduce the same thing that T'Pol points out in this episode, that it's not just Earth that's at risk. It's really short-sighted for them to think that only Earth is at risk, and it has nothing to do with this. That's why I said the Vulcans were so fucking stupid at the end of season 2. And so it makes sense that the Andorians would be a bit smarter than that, and there's such a touch of selfishness involved in this, which is actually really smart, to be fair, because they're right. They totally would be next. But also, yeah, the friendship that he had gained with Archer over the years. And plus, also, as they pointed out in this episode, when Shran says, "Tell Archer we're no longer even. Now he owes me!" Which, God damn it, I love Jeffrey Combs as Shran. So good, and he's so good. And that makes total sense for his characters. And plus, I just love that they show up. Now, here's the little problem I have with this episode, but to be fair, I think I had the same problem with Best of Both Worlds, which I actually think is way worse than that episode. And that is that Earth is completely defenseless. In fact, they come across this, research space station that the reptilians destroy, and, what's his face, the primate dude who, I don't know if they ever got his name, but he was like, "Oh, are there any weapons on there?" And Archer's like, "No, it's just a research station." You think actually Earth would, even at this stage in their development? I mean, think of modern. I know this is supposed to be a more peaceful paradise type of Earth, but still, they're aware of hostile alien races from the Vulcans. They know they exist. You would think that, especially after that freaking probe came and killed 7 million people, they sent Enterprise off to investigate. You'd think they would just sit and twiddle on their thumbs and not build orbital platforms. Especially when Archer gave them a timetable to, I think they had exactly a year before Earth was going to be destroyed. They wouldn't just fuck around. They would build some defenses, and I would argue even before the Xindi threat, that they would have some sort of orbital defenses. Now, as I said, I think this problem is exasperated in Best of Both Worlds, and I didn't even talk about that. That by the 24th century times, where the Federation is a thing, they should have massive starbase and planetary defenses. I mean, even fucking a show like The Expanse, where the technology is minuscule compared to what it is in Star Trek, where Star Trek is more magical, obviously not as realistic, but still, the technology is way more advanced. You think they would have all these different, I mean, as I said, The Expanse, they have orbital platforms that defend Earth or whatever, and they got nothing. The Borg showed up and nothing's there to stand there. It was just the Enterprise. Really? One ship, that's all I have. Are you saying that? Well, anyway, I'm getting more into Best of Both Worlds, sorry. But, long story short, it's even more unbelievable in that episode, so I probably can give this episode a pass a bit more easy there. So anyway, specifics with Archer and Reed. First of all, I love how they have Reed as a badass in this episode. I think a lot of these tertiary characters in Enterprise, like Reed, are underutilized, and that's something that season 3 and 4 corrected, which is another reason why those seasons are so much better than the first two. And I love how Reed has this moment to shine, that he kicks ass, that you see him, he has this badass moment where he beats the crap out of the Xindi and throws him off the side, and they play that badass music. I mean, the music is really great in this episode. So I like that. And Hoshi, how they involve her, how she's suffering from trauma, being tortured, and Archer is still needs her help to save the human race. He's trying not to push her. He doesn't want to be an asshole. He tries to be respectful of the trauma she suffered. But at the same time, Earth is about to be destroyed, and she has to help save it. Otherwise, the entire human race is screwed, so you can't kind of blame Archer. And I think the way, and this is something the whole arc has done so well with the character building with Archer, which, to be fair, in the first two seasons, he was a flat, uninteresting, two-dimensional, stupid hero captain stereotype with no depth to him, whereas in this season, they gave him this really strong character arc that concludes in this episode, and that shows that Archer is skirting that line of of respecting humans, respecting Hoshi, respecting the trauma she went through, but at the same time having to push her more than he should, because otherwise there would be no human race. So you can understand where he's coming from. So that was great. And of course they had to have this one-on-one fight scene between Archer and Dolan, which actually reminded me a lot of Insurrection, where they had a one-on-one fight scene with Picard and Raffle over this weapon, and they're trying to beam aboard the weapon. They're fighting over it, and there's like a little steep drop between them, and Picard eventually kills him. I think Picard, does he throw him off the edge, or does he shoot him? But anyway, Archer here doesn't throw him off the edge. He just puts a bomb on his shoulder and detonates, which was such a badass moment. But to be fair, the choreography in this fight scene was not the best. It was a tad bit cheesy how they have to have the big hero and the big villain square off one-on-one. That's what I really hated about Insurrection. But I will say it did work a little better here. And I do think you kind of need it, to be fair. And I think it is better earned because of the setup, because of the foundation, because of all the interactions between Archer and Dom. We had moments where Dom was torturing Archer and wanted to kill him, but the others and they were holding him back. And here you get them square off. It was really great. But again, I will say, the scene where Archer is like detonating the weapon and he's running the platform trying to get away, and they have this shot of him like running in slow motion with all the explosions coming up around him, was very Michael Bay-esque. And if you are familiar with me and my feelings about Michael Bay, you would know that is a huge insult and not at all a compliment. In fact, it came off as extremely cheesy and contrived, and I sometimes even laugh when I see that particular shot. But again, the episode's so great and the music's so great and this moment is so great and so well earned that I'm willing to forgive it for that. And also gotta talk about the storyline with Enterprise going off to destroy the sphere, which was also an amazing story. I love how the main ship of the show, that the whole entire show is named after, Enterprise, is going on the mission with most of the crew. Like only a few people, Hoshi and Reed and Archer and a few nameless Makos, are involved in the main plot to stop Earth from being blown up. The rest of the crew, and as I said, the main ship that the whole show is named after, goes off to help save the Xindi. Which, I love that dynamic. The Xindi, they're the villains, they're the bad guys. They were presented at the end of season 2 as they're going to destroy Earth. They're evil, must stop them. They're the evil guys who killed 7 million people, are going to destroy Earth. And a year later, it ends with the Enterprise trying to save them. That's Star Trek. That is Star Trek. That's why it's better than fucking Star Wars or anything like that, where it's just good versus evil. Nah, these villains, evil villains, the heroes are going to risk their lives while their home planet is in peril to save them. Because it's more complex than that. Because it's different. They know that the Xindi is being manipulated by the sphere builders, and there's a lot of ins and outs and political gatherings that was so well earned. And the scenes in particular where the sphere builders are trying to stop them as they make the space around the sphere like a lot more poisonous to humans, and it makes it so they can appear. So they're running around the ship, putting their hands to the walls and trying to destroy the ship. Which, one nitpick, I think they could probably destroy the ship a lot easier if they really put their minds to it, but still amazing. And I love this, like, the ticking clock moment. It was done to perfection with, Phlox on the bridge saying, we gotta get out of here. You keep saying, the 11 minutes, we're all dead, 5 minutes till we're all dead. And that final scene, oh my god, it was just so damn good. I know it may be cliche to go down to the last minute, but I love it where they get to the point where Phlox is like, screaming, "T'Pol! T'Pol!" And she's like, I know. And eventually he's like, that's it! Time's up! We gotta get out of here! And freaking Trip is like, no, I'm telling you, I got it. Just give me a minute. And he's like, we don't have a minute! And he's like, no, I'm telling you, I got it. And finally, when Phlox says time's up, Trip's like, you're right, it is. And he destroys the sphere. It's just that... It is so damn good. I'm sorry. All respect to Best of Both Worlds and those who love it. That is like a billion times more exciting than Data saying, oh, I put them all to sleep. And Picard going, sleep, Data. And they put them all to sleep and they overload. Oh, this is malfunction. The ship blows up. I'm sorry, this is way more exciting than that. Is also a hell of a lot well earned. I'm sorry to keep comparing it to the Best of Both Worlds. I'm sure many of you watching this stop bringing up Best of Both Worlds. I'm sorry, but I just love this episode so much. And as I said, all three of these episodes that end season 3, because season 3 as a whole, as I said, is one of the best seasons. But it's really these 3 episodes that are its crowning achievement, its masterpiece, and it's just one of the best examples of the Earth is in peril storyline in Star Trek, which they kind of started beating to death towards the end because Rick Berman got in his head that that's what made money. But this is probably one of the best, if not the best, examples of that. And I think, it does get some credit because it is one of the top 5 highest rated episodes on IMDb. And a lot of people do cite this as one of the best Enterprise episodes, but I still don't think it gets as much credit as it deserves. I think it deserves Best of Both Worlds level of credit, but that's just me. But, downsides. Oh, before I get into downsides, we have to get to the Archer is dead, which kind of feeds into the downside because that was a really powerful scene, particularly the moment where Reed and Hoshi first come back to the Enterprise and they tell him that Archer's dead. Like that was so well acted. You could just feel just how affected they were by this news. They're like, oh, is Earth okay? And like, yeah, sure, Earth is fine, but Archer is dead. And all credit to the actors. They played the scene amazingly well. And one of my favorite moments in the entire show is when Phlox is looking after Porthos. And T'Pol's asking about Porthos and saying, Phlox like how he misses his father, or I don't know what he calls Archer, but he misses his father or his friend or whatever. And Phlox is just like, oh, don't worry, he'll get over eventually. It's only a matter of time. And then T'Pol leans down to Porthos and pets him and says, did you hear that? You'll get over this soon. It's only a matter of time. And that was just her delivery was just so great and so powerful because you can, and just it was such a well written scene too, because I love subtle scenes like that where they don't bang you over the head with oh, this is emotional and this is, oh, this person's sad. Is that it's her way of saying that to herself basically, that she hopes she'll get over it. With how time passes because she's feeling like shit, which is even more powerful that she's a Vulcan and that she can't help but be so affected by Archer's death. Now, this is kind of underscored by the fact that just 5 seconds later, 2 minutes later, is revealed that Archer actually isn't dead, which is the fake death cliche is one that I really don't like, particularly episodes like Next Phase, where everyone's talking about Geordi being dead, or The Most Toys, where everyone's talking about Data being dead when it's obvious he's not. There's a cliche I come to really hate, but I actually don't mind it that much here, just because it was so well earned and so powerful, and even though it is revealed that he's actually not dead 2 seconds later, it doesn't matter because as far as they know, he's dead. And it's just, and I don't know, it bothered me in The Most Toys when they're acting like Data was dead. When we, the audience, you're idiots, he's not dead. I'm sick of seeing this. But something about this just works a lot better. It probably has a lot to do with the build up to it, how more well earned it was, and also just how well written these damn scenes were. As it wasn't just, Jordy and Wesley going like, "Oh, Data was such a great. I'm so sad he's dead." Instead, you had the Paul going down, petting Porthos, and saying, "Do you hear that? You'll get better." It's only like it's just better writing, and it's just so damn good. But the biggest flaw, and the elephant in the room, is the cliffhanger ending. Now, I once did a top 10 cliffhanger endings of Star Trek, and I think this is in my top 5 worst. Even though I love as I said, I think this is one of the best episodes in the entire Star Trek franchise. I love this episode to death. But the cliffhanger was really dumb. It was really cheesy. Now, there's some people who theorize that they just wrote this cliffhanger in there because they were worried about the show getting canceled, so they wanted to kind of give the studio, the network, incentives to keep them going for a year, because you can't have it end on this stupid, silly, over-the-top note. We gotta keep the show going. Which I'm not so sure I agree with that, but if it is the case, then that's a really, really stupid tactic. I think they're actually lucky they got a season 4, because honestly, I don't think studios give a fuck if a show ends on a low note or a silly note. They'll be like, fuck that. You're just proving to us why the show should end. Because there are other shows that were canceled even that end on a silly cliffhanger, and those networks didn't give a fuck. So I think they were very lucky that the show was renewed and they were able to resolve it. Because as I said, I saw Stormfront before I saw this episode, so I already knew how this cliffhanger was resolved and what it was leading to, and so maybe that's part of the reason why I actually don't mind it as much as some others, because I heard other people like rip this to shreds and say how stupid it was. But when I first saw it, I knew the resolution, and the resolution actually really worked, and this is something I talked about in my review of Stormfronts, part 1 and 2, which I already did a review on those episodes, that it actually saved the stupid premise and made it work. It made it fit into the overall theme of Star Trek and made it make sense. So I commend it for that. But, that being said, it does frustrate me whenever I watch this episode that they end on this cliffhanger instead of showing Enterprise return home to Earth and the reception that they get. Now, eventually they would do that for Home, which is one of my favorite episodes of Enterprise. I love that episode, which is the episode that directly follows Stormfront's Part 1 and 2, which shows Enterprise returning home. I think that Home should have been the premiere episode of Season 4, and that Season 3 should have ended with them, Endgame, Voyager type, how that ends with them going to Earth and it fades to black. Of course, that you ranted against that because that was bullshit, because they were ending the whole show, which is absolutely not what you fucking do. But it would have been okay to end a season like that and then follow up with a whole nother season which directly shows them returning to Earth, which is something that they should have done on Voyager but never did. So that's why that sucked. But that's why I'm saying it would be okay to do it here. Don't get me wrong. Those from my channel's like, did he just say a good thing about Endgame? The answer is no, I did not. I totally did not. I just say it would work here because it wouldn't be the end of the entire show, that you have to follow it up with the next season. And I think it would have been a great way to end the season, actually, to have Enterprise go to Earth and have the reception. Well, not even save the reception for Home for the premiere of Season 4, but just have them flying towards Earth and show the executive producer Rick Berman credits or whatever, and then fade to black as the Enterprise goes to Earth, like Endgame-esque. But then in Season 4, open with the same way the episode Home opened, with Archer giving a huge speech to the huge crowds and we're back and blah blah, and that episode was perfect too, so I wouldn't change anything about it, as I already talked about when I covered that episode as well. So anyway, my rating for 0 Hour out of 10 is a 10, the best. Of course I'm going to give it a 10. You might think, oh, aren't you going to give it a 9 because of that stupid cliffhanger? Now, fuck, no. I mean, the cliffhanger does frustrate me, and I wish it wasn't there. But this is still one of the best episodes of the entire fucking show. Definitely, hands down. Always makes my top 10, maybe even top 5 when I do Enterprise top 10s, and I think it would make my top 20 of the entire franchise. Or at least this along with Countdown and 0 Hour, because really they all tell one story. That is the perfect ending. It's one of the most well-earned, exciting episodes about Earth being in danger. And it's got great character moments. Archer, Hoshi, T'Pol, all very well acted, all very well put together. So, yeah, an amazing episode. Anyway, that is it for my review of 0 Hour. Be sure to check out my channel as I cover many more Star Trek episodes. And also I cover other shows like The Expanse and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.